Start wherever you want, man.
Okay, yeah.
I'll get it to you. Want to clap again?
No, as long as I got a clap in there, we're good. All right, so welcome to Profession Unknown, episode number 3 with Shane Mitchell, our wonderful guest this month, and myself, Joshua Copeland. I'm excited to have this interview because not only are we kind of friends and stuff, we both have kids and, you know, and all that good stuff, but we also work together at the same place. So we share a lot of the same war stories and learned a lot, you know, as far as tech and stuff like that together. So yeah, basically, I want to kind of start, you know, things off just like I did with the previous episodes, talk about where you're from, and, you know, what kind of got you into tech, you know.
So I was actually born here in Las Vegas, lived here my whole life, born and raised. As long as I can remember, I've always loved science and technology. I remember being like 5 or 6 years old, and everybody, when you're 5 and 6 and you're in kindergarten, they say, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" "Oh, a fireman, a cop, a dinosaur, whatever." You know, I was like, "I want to be an aerospace engineer." And people are like, "Do you even know what that is? You're 5 years old." I was like, "Yeah, I want to design the first spaceship that can take people to another planet." And they're like, "You're 5 years old. How are you thinking like that?" I was like, "That's just, I've always known that I was into that science and that engineering aspect of things."
Yeah. I mean, aerospace engine, do you still have a desire to kind of learn some of that stuff?
So I actually follow some SpaceX stuff every now and then. I'm, you know, do a little research into current, you know, things. Looked at a lot of, the solar system and universe, all of that kind of stuff.
Your
try to stay.
childhood dream job was much more achievable than mine. Mine was an astronaut. At least you'd be making the space shuttles, which seems much more plausible from a numbers game.
I would design the space shuttle and watch you go up in it.
Yeah. Here, pull that thing down so that way they can see you here. Or just like move this black thing because I'm like staring at that right now from you. Or lower it. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah, I can still hear you. Okay. Sorry, I'm OCD like that.
All right.
So you kind of were fascinated just with like space shuttles and like planes and stuff like that. Did you ever, when you were kind of imagining this, did you ever get like an opportunity for like, this is how you would go and achieve that or anything like that?
No, not really. I just tried to make sure I paid a lot of attention in like science class and stuff like that. And once I was older in high school and, you know, life hits you and reality hits you and, you know, it became apparent that it's not as easy to be an aerospace engineer as it seemed when you were 6 years old.
Yeah, one of my clients is an aerospace engineer, and I'm just like, wow, like, it's crazy. He worked on like some of the space shuttle or the Virgin one that like has those boosters that go into like, you know, not full outer space. It's like 50,000 feet or something, but I think you're like weightless up there or whatever. But it seems like you'd probably have a good chance if you went into the Air Force or something like that too. You know what I mean? To be able to start working on stuff like that. I don't know. Did military or anything ever kind of come across your desk or?
So actually my dad was Army Special Forces, and my uncle was a Marine Special Forces, later recruited into the Delta Force unit.
Oh, wow.
A lot of military growing up, pretty hard. I was like 5, 6 years old, and my dad's like, "Do a handstand with your feet up against the wall and give me 10 push-ups." Every morning I had to do 10 handstand push-ups at 6 years old. He told me, "If you can't do 50 sit-ups right now, you're going to bed without dinner." Anytime I would have to just, you know, on command do stuff like that.
So your dad was a real military.
I would get waking up at 2 a.m, and he would wake me up. He'd go, mom's dead, sisters are dead, everyone's dead. You have 30 seconds to pack a backpack with everything you need to survive and jump on my motorcycle. Go. And he would leave my room.
And
I'm like,
didn't
holy
know
crap.
if he's telling the truth or...
I don't know. I just grab a bunch of stuff. I run outside. And he's on his motorcycle, and he goes, 5 seconds left, and he takes off. We run out to the desert, and he's like, okay, let's see what you packed. My dad
has like some toys and stuff.
But it's my favorite coloring book.
Yeah. No, that's crazy. So but you never looked into that as like.
So I shattered the bone in my foot into 4 pieces. And,
doing what?
So to put myself through school, I couldn't get funded, like financial aid or whatever. I couldn't get funded for anything, and I had to provide all my own money for school. So to be able to make enough money to get loans and everything, I became an electrician. And as I was apprenticing doing electrical work, we finished our job. I had a schedule one Friday, and there was a basketball court and a basketball, and we had 2 hours left. And my boss goes, hey, let's go play a game of basketball to finish the day off. You're getting paid for the whole day, just hang out and play basketball. I was like, okay. 5 minutes into the basketball game, I did a pump fake, and the guy jumped, and then I looped around, and when I went to jump, he landed on my foot, and I just heard a
Oh my gosh.
So.
Wow. At least it wasn't your boss that did it. That'd be awkward. Yeah. Although I'm sure the whole situation was awkward anyway.
Yeah. But, I mean, I went to join, actually. I went to sign up. Like, I was like, let me just check for the reserves. You know, I have a kid on the way. I don't know if going full into into like the Marine Corps or something would be something I would want to do. I know you can do that little ASVAB test and just see where you would fit. So I went and talked to the National Guard and talked to them and everything. And he's like, okay, well, so we're section of the Army. You have to take the same ASVAB as everybody else and blah, blah, blah. He gives me the test. And he's like, wow, I've never seen anybody score a 96 on the practice ASVAB or the practice little test before. You could really join in being almost any role you want in the Army. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, you have to go get me medical records on this and this. And if you broke your foot, we have to see how bad it is to see whether we can make an exception consideration. And apparently shattering the pinky toe into 4 pieces is too much.
Oh, wow.
So
they basically were just like, forget it.
They're like, yeah, this guy can't run 12 miles.
Yeah.
He can't do the boot camp stuff. His foot's going to break again.
So you were doing electrician stuff at the time, which you actually did some for my parents. You're still very, very good at that. It's like a fallback career, I imagine, or like something always on the side,
I like working with my hands, and I'm of the mindset that if you're going to take your time to do something, whether it's for work or for yourself or anything, if you're going to take the time to do something, make sure it's worth being proud of. Mm-hmm. Make sure it's worth putting your name on.
Yeah.
If I do any work, I want to be proud that I did that.
Yeah, totally. I think I had kind of epiphany. A lot of things that are made by hand are becoming more valuable because we live in such an age of like machines just making everything, right? Specifically, I think we were talking about knives the other day, like handmade knives and stuff, right? Like there's something about the craftsmanship of it. In software, you don't really get that as much. That's the only like con sometimes with building stuff with software, unless it's like apps or something that has some hardware aspect. But it's kind of like you get that like passive feeling, like, oh, I built that and it's working, but you don't get that tangible feeling. You know what I mean?
See, not necessarily. So to me, it's like if your lights turn on, the electrician did his job. But if the lights turn on and you see a wire hanging out of the wall and the pipe shoots out of the wall into the ceiling, you're like, what the hell did this guy do? Okay, it works, but you're not sure if you should be scared still or not. Sure. And if you look at that code and you're like, whoa, should I even be using this program?
Right.
Or you can look at this and be like, oh my gosh, look at the comments, look at the documentation, look at the...
You're talking about craftsmanship.
The craftsmanship, again, being proud of what you did.
Absolutely, yeah. It's just more digital, I guess I'm saying, compared to other crafts. So before electrician, like in high school, like what were you kind of doing and stuff like that? Did you start messing with computers in high school or before that, or?
So, my parents were way behind the curve when it came to that kind of stuff, and I was 16 years old when they finally bought a computer for the, like, this is the family computer. Nobody's allowed to touch it. You have to ask permission. And at that time, I was going and hanging out with friends. I had a buddy who had an extra computer that we would go over, and I would use his extra computer. We'd LAN up all the time and play Counter-Strike. And, we'd always torrent, back in the day, we'd be torrenting old, like, anime DBZ ripoffs and stuff. And, so I knew a little bit, and I had some friends that were into the computer stuff, which helped spark an interest. Like, man, these guys are really smart. All that crap that they could do, I enjoy that.
After Napster, then?
Yeah, this was like around the time of Napster, before Napster, stuff like that.
Because Napster, I remember when I first saw it, we downloaded the Metallica album, Ride the Lightning, and we're like, it's only going to be done in 2 days. You know what I mean? Now it's like 2 minutes. It's mind-boggling.
Yeah,
we thought that was fast at the time. It's crazy how, society and like just normal like averages, you kind of like get used to things and get spoiled, honestly, in some sense nowadays.
Well, we would use Napster too and all that, of course, everybody did. We'd be downloading songs, and pick individual songs, and you get one song that, why is that song 800 kilobytes instead of the 325 to 400? Yeah, that one's got something attached to it. It's the same length song. Nope, not getting that one.
Emule and all those other garbage ones.
So with the files being so small and like, it was easier to see for that kind of stuff.
Well, torrent was like groundbreaking too, because instead of downloading A to Z, it could download different parts of it, and I remember when that came out, that was crazy. Now downloading movies was realistic, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or not just like ending up at 99% and like just stuck there. Happens in torrent sometimes too.
Yeah, nobody has that last piece.
Yeah, so you had, what'd you do? Like, were you kind of just downloading a lot of stuff? Did you play any video games on the thing and stuff?
Oh, yeah, I would play Diablo. I was the PC Diablo, never the console Diablo, online. I was the guy who would go town portal kill everybody.
The hacking was so easy because it was all client side, I think. They didn't really have any server-side code or whatever.
Oh, dude, we used to make our own items. Yeah.
Or the server was hosted on the client or whatever, right?
Yeah. But so we got a computer. My family got a computer. Oh, nobody's allowed to touch it. You have to ask for permission, and we have to.
Was it like a Windows?
It was a Hewlett Packard Pavilion something. It was it was a Windows XP Home Edition, and it was like Windows XP was the new operating system.
That was a good one. That was like the groundbreaking one.
Actually,
for the ME and then 2000 and all that were just kind of like, okay, but there wasn't a lot of great programs for it. XP really was where a lot of good games and stuff.
Yeah, my cousin got a computer shortly after me, and he got the Windows NT, and he was pissed when he would always ask me to come help him with stuff, and I'd go over there, and I'm looking, why isn't this going? I'm like, oh, it's because you have the NT edition. He's like, damn you, Windows.
Yeah. So did you ever even know oh my god, people are programming this game like Diablo and stuff like that?
So really, Diablo was the one thing that got me interested in development, because I was doing CS LANs and figuring out the networking stuff, and I was like, I don't care, that stuff doesn't really interest me, but I have to know how it works, so I'll learn it. Play some games with some friends, and then I finally, after using a computer, finally got used to just basic concepts. Like, if you don't know what to do or you're not sure what it is, right click it, check out property, just the basic things of playing around, and started doing the same thing, looking into Diablo, and I was like, no. What it was is the first time I tried to install a Diablo mod, there was an issue with it, and I couldn't play Diablo anymore. And I did something with the whole license key, or so it was something weird, and I was all upset. So I started ripping into core files and figuring out what's going on.
Edit.
And I found some config file that had some setting, and I changed the setting, and it fixed it. And I was like, holy shit, how did I do that? And ever since then, I was like, this stuff isn't that hard. This stuff isn't that hard. I can do that. And it's just about that first step of either finding something that's worth it or just saying, screw it, and diving in and just, going in over your head at least once to see what it's like, to see how overwhelming over your head is.
Yeah, if you don't try it, you have no concept of whether, because some things that look hard to some people, they become a natural, you know what I mean? But, so you started doing, how did you kind of get more involved in programming? Was it really your first job that kind of threw you into,
So when I was in high school, you get to pick your electives, and for junior year, in sophomore year, I tried to join the wood shop and they were out. They were full. So I tried to join the auto class and they were full. So in sophomore year, I ended up getting stuck in home ec as my elective, right? Oh, and then junior year came around and I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to try for those because they're going to be full again and I'm going to stuck in home ec. And there was this class called computer technologies, and I thought it was just a typing class. And I was like, whatever, it'll be an easy credit because I can type fast. And it ended up being an introductory computer science class. And we built poker programs and blackjack programs in .NET. And I literally finished the whole course, the whole syllabus for the year. By the midterm, I had already been done with everything. And she gave me, the day of the midterm, everybody else taking the midterm, she just gave me the final. And the whole second half of the year, I was just the teacher's aide, helping everybody else with their projects.
So that was your breakthrough moment right there.
I realized, wow, I take to this really well.
I really relate with you on that because before I got sent to my grandma's house. She lived in Arizona and I was there for, I want to say, a good 4 or 5 months, maybe even 6. But I went to a library and I got a couple programming books, and she had this wicked old machine that wouldn't run anything. And I read those books front to back, everything was in my head like a puzzle. And once I got back to my computer at home after that trip, it all just came out, and I built a game in a week, right? But that was kind of the ball that got pushed, that snowball effect from there, when it was wow, I can do it. I can actually build something like this, you know what I mean? So that must have really kind of perked your interest as far as development. But you didn't you went to ITT just like me, right?
Yeah.
Did you go for computer science then?
Yeah, I only have an associate's from there. I have associates in software applications development.
Yeah, the same degree. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, in my experience, they throw you through the ringer in Java, some web. I know I did PHP there. There was C++ and stuff like that. Did you kind of touch all of those languages?
I did mostly C++ and C#.NET. I did do Java, and I did not do any PHP. The instructor for my major was a retired Windows operating system developer. Very, very smart guy. But he was anti-Unix kernel. He's like, I'm teaching you Java because it's in the curriculum, and that's it. So he literally just enough.
He was a .NET guy.
Yeah, he was a .NET guy. Yeah. His daughter was the lead developer on the Vista project at Microsoft. Ah. She came in on 2 different occasions and kind of talked with us and helped us. When I started that second year of that class, we had 12 people. By the 5th week, we had 6 people, and 5 people finished that class out of the all the people that started.
Yeah, I want to say 30 were in the beginning of mine, and there was 5 or 6, maybe 7, that really graduated in the end. But yeah, I mean, again, that's where I saw passion versus people who are looking for a paycheck. Even in college, I could see it in those rooms of people who were there because mom and dad sent them, versus people who are there because they have a kid on the way and they need to start a career, and you know what I mean, and they're sick of working the hour to hour kind of deal. So you were doing electrician stuff at the time you were going to ITT then?
Oh yeah, I was working full time and going to school full time.
Yeah, and did you find out you were having a kid around then, or is that much later?
That was a little bit later. So I actually was going to go back for my bachelor's to ITT with an ISS degree, system security. And the first week of school, I ended up in the hospital for a week. I had a cyst the size of a softball on my pancreas. And so it was like this whole big thing. I couldn't go to school, and so I had to, I kind of dropped out the first week of going back for a bachelor's.
So did you get stuck with those loans then?
Oh yeah, they charged me for they charged me a whole semester. Or no,
wait, you never
I got it.
The
I got it. I argued down, but they still charged me for that whole first semester for a bachelor's. Okay. They charged me for books that I never got. They charged me for all kinds of stuff, but that's why ITT got sued, I guess.
And that's why they don't exist anymore. Yeah. They were doing so. Even with me, my parents couldn't co-sign any of my loans, so my interest rates were 14+%. You know what I mean? Oh. But all that stuff's paid off now, luckily. But dude, it took years. It's crazy how they attach that to you for life. Oh, yeah. Unless you go to the military, I hear, then you can kind of like get something with or forgive it or whatever. But I'm not.
They could forgive a portion of it if you obtain the loan before you go in the military. Well, it depends. Is that what it is? Or it depends on what the loan is and all that. Yeah.
So after you graduated, did you get career placement then? How did that work?
So they say they offer career placement, and they tried to hook me up with one place that wanted me to be a representative at a call center.
You're like, this is not a
program. I'm like, I got a software development degree, and you're like, here's a call center position that has nothing to do with your degree that you could have gotten before you ever got this degree.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that whole deal, and I think I did. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I didn't actually get a job through them. It might have been on Craigslist. I literally found my first job.
That's exactly where I found the job at Selling Source, was Craigslist.
Really?
So I was an electrician, and I'm like, apparently I'm good at this because I keep moving up. And even though I'm not doing like the union classes or the schooling for electrician stuff, apparently I'm picking it up fast enough because I'm telling people they're wrong. And I'm a second-year apprentice, and they're telling me, go run this job. You're the foreman. And I'm like leading journeyman, and I'm not even a journeyman. So apparently I'm doing something right. I make, at that point, I'm graduating out of the, my associate's degree. I'm making $16, $18 an hour, something like that as an electrician. That's decent money. Everything I can find, you have an associate's degree in software application? Okay, well, here's a data entry position at $10.50 an hour. It's really hard to make that jump, especially because as soon as I graduated and I got that associate's and I was finally starting to look for work in that field, that's when I met my wife. And, it's like, I'm doing okay now. I'm just going to stick with this. And I actually stayed as an electrician for a while, for a couple of years. Never stopped messing around on computers. Ripping. I was ripping out Windows and installing Ubuntu on my laptops and my desktop computers. Before I even went to school before I went to college after high school, and I was doing that kind of stuff before I started working actually in the industry. It's always a passion, I like that stuff. I learned a lot of hard lessons about Linux the hard way, because when I worked at Selling Source and I had other people that knew Linux and could give you good, reference of their own experience, it's a lot to learn from. And that's when I learned that, like growing up, probably every parent is like, learn from my mistakes, but nobody ever does. And I was probably, I was at Selling Source before I learned how to learn from someone else's fucking mistakes. I'm sorry. Yeah. Because You know, like I've made a lot of mistakes and hear people and I'm like, no, that's stupid. That doesn't make sense. That's got to be this. And nope, it's not that. And sure enough, they were right. And I should have just listened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's hard to, but that's another thing though, is I didn't feel like my expertise was gaining traction until it was around other people who knew what they were talking about, right? Because until then the bar gets raised of like, okay, I'm nowhere near these geniuses. I better, like, dude, and then you're right, you're running back home installing Linux, trying to much better to break it there than a production server, I'll tell you that. Yeah. But so you so on Craigslist, you submitted your resume. How was the interview process like with no experience like that? I mean, you had the degree, obviously, so I mean, you had something at least to kind of get you in the door, but I'm sure it was a lot of like the interview process is really what landed you the job, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I saw a couple positions. I'm looking everywhere because at that time it was like the economy was going way down, and I'm in the construction industry at that time, so my work is very sporadic. And I'm like, you know what? This is the time. Work's super slow. I'm hurting for money. Now's the time. If I'm going to switch industries to take a pay cut, now's the time for me to try to, deal with a pay cut. And so I'm looking for places, and I get a call back from Partner Weekly. And so I go in, and I'm like, okay, I'm all nervous. Like, this is probably a big company. And the position is more of a data entry position than it seemed like from the ad. So I was like, okay. And when I explained to the interviewer what my experience was, and I was like, look, I solve people's problems. If they have an issue with their computer, I figure it out and I solve it. And I'm not saying I'm like a help desk. Like, I will go and figure out what file is, whatever, and I'll figure out how the code's written, and I'll rewrite it. I'll figure it out, all right, well, good. You're a software developer, so here, data entry. I got the job, took the pay cut, and luckily it was with a company that had hired a handful of people for the same position, but nobody really understood how the systems work that they were using. So you remember Chris Rogers was a guy I worked with, and I got hired there right after he did, and he's like, yeah, I'm just finally getting used to these systems, and he was kind of showing me, yeah, this is working like this, and this is working like this, and together we discovered that these systems are not being used right, and this is how these systems need to be used, and we fixed the system, and we overhauled everything, and got it working the way it was supposed to, and it went from 5 people full-time position to maintain that platform to 2 people part-time position to handle the platform, and the other part-time we were junior devs.
Yeah.
So
you're able to simplify the system and stuff like that because you really sat there and tried to understand what this complex system is doing, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, even then too, there was many. I mean, I don't even know if they knew they were doing it, but they were kind of building microservices or different services to interact with things. So those are complex systems for sure there. Yeah. But that's cool. So that kind of probably put you to the surface as far as a viable developer and making your confidence level go up, okay, I'm kind of, so PHP I know is a big thing there, at least, when I was working there too. It's always kind of been a pretty, other than some Java things. Was that kind of your first experience with PHP then?
Yep.
And then so you're like, okay, did you go home and learn a bunch of stuff then, or read any books or?
Yeah, I went home and read up on some stuff, played around with a lot of stuff. I know I was working more in the database initially than the back end code. And then from the database, he had me doing front end change. So I went from the database to some front end to some database to some front end before I started messing with the back end.
That?
No, I had done database work in school, and I've had to build relations and all that stuff. So the queries and all, wasn't too difficult.
Yeah.
It was more figuring out the tooling and the specifics of our systems and the structures of our data more than anything. But as you know, I caught on to that really quick, and next thing you know, I was writing I was like, you know what? I'm helping the front end team, and they're going through all the bureaucratic stuff with the business to try to like get to newer technologies, but they can't do it. So I'm just going to do it to play around. And then I just build a little Node server with a little chat room, and I was build a little Node chat room for the developers real quick on my box. And I just like playing with stuff. Everybody's like using PHP and Symfony, and I'm like, okay, well, Symfony's supposed to be like one of the harder frameworks to learn. Crap, and I don't even know PHP really. Double crap. Okay, screw it. I'm going to build a Symfony project. So I built a fully responsive Symfony site, zombie themed Symfony site, so I can show the front end developers how some of the newer front end technologies should work and proof of concept that while learning about the back end stuff and learning about the framework that we need. And really, I think that's what showed our boss at the time that, okay, he obviously is more than willing and capable of getting shit done. Give him some actual development work.
Right, right. So you worked there for quite a while. I know you were there for like...
About 5 years.
5 years almost, yeah. So you kind of were gaining more and more responsibilities and things like that. And then you kind of moved on to Scalable Group, huh?
Yeah.
So explain what you did there a little bit. What was your title here? Lead developer, system architect. So you were running a team and stuff like that there, or kind of running the architecture design and all that?
Yeah, so it was a small startup. When most people think of a startup, they think, rapid development, got to get going, have very fast pace. Very much so with this place. The thing that's very different where I was compared to most other startups is most startups say, this is our product. We're a startup and we're trying to launch this product. What our company did was sort of like an incubator company for an angel investor. So he said, I have an idea. Proof of concept my idea, and we're going to see if we can liquidate the proof of concept as a company to somebody, or if we can, show that it's viable enough and spin it up as its own company, hire its own resources as a company. So we were in the business of making companies. That's what we did. So he'd say, hey, I acquired this platform, it's old legacy 2002 PHP code, and there's zero routing, zero framework. It's 2,000 line long htaccess file. So figure it out. We need this and this to happen with this platform. I had to reverse engineer what's going on, find a way to make it suitable and stable and secure, and figure out a way to add whatever functionality on the fly as a proof of concept, not production ready, but still production ready enough because it's already a production platform. Or we have this other proof of concept. We have our partners that we're dealing with, and we want you to build this huge system, but we don't have project managers and we don't have anybody to properly plan it. So plan it and build it. And
yeah.
So I pretty much got very much so got the dive into the deep end of the full stack of figure out the infrastructure, figure out the front end, figure out the business tie through, figure it out, figure out the best, efficiency of costs, everything.
So did you guys already have like an AWS or some sort of setup like that, or?
When I got there, they had somebody who had hired onto there from the previous company. They were a junior dev at the previous company, and they had a stack of a dozen or so WordPress sites that they were maintaining for ad arbitrage revenue. And I came in there and I was like, okay, let me show you guys what a real system's supposed to do. And I actually had to have I had to literally put my foot down almost and have a conversation with somebody about just because WordPress does it doesn't mean it's a good way to do something. Just because
using the right tool for the right job, yeah. Was that saying like when you when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail or whatever. You know, that's the one key thing I've learned about architects versus just a developer of a particular language is they're not afraid to look at different languages or different frameworks or technologies to adopt for the right solutions, you know, because some of them are like enterprise level, you know, licensing is probably crazy, but you can like tweak the thing to the nth degree versus there's this open source thing. We're going to have to kind of figure it out. Can't do everything this thing can do, but kind of, you know what I mean? So I can appreciate people more who have that kind of mixed experience and can offer, and they don't always just knee jerk to WordPress or to, you know, Laravel or Symfony or whatever without thinking it all through, you know? So did you touch Laravel there? So did you choose Laravel because it was kind of prototyping language or?
It was chosen for me.
Okay.
I did not have a choice.
I shouldn't say it's not the prototyping language, but it's nice to prototype in.
That's what it was. That's what it was developed for. It originated as a framework for quick prototyping and not to be scalable. That's what it was like. You can go read up.
Once you put it in production, it stays in production. So yeah, I mean, it's not bad. It really isn't. It's I find it's just a lot of helpers versus in Symfony. You know, now Symfony's gone more towards that auto wiring kind of thing. But it's crazy because even back in the TSS days when you and I worked there, half of the tooling and frameworks that exist now. You know what I mean, and are even better. Like the speed increase of PHP 7 and it like really has put like a whole renaissance in PHP itself. But I kind of get this whole like PHP guy vibe and nobody thinks I know anything else. And I'm like, dude, I've done things in Node. I've done things in, you know, you name it, a lot of different languages. So kind of sucks. But at the same time, you know, again, it's like eventually at the end of the day, you're going to have to choose something to build the dang thing in. So
what I think is funny about that is like if you look at a resume and you see Microsoft Technologies only, you're going to be like, okay. If you see nothing but .NET, you're going to say they're a .NET guy. If you see .NET, C#, C++, you know, you're going to be like, okay, he's like a, you know, fully vetted Microsoft guy. He's like essentially a full stack for the Microsoft world, right? Yeah. Or you could say, oh, well, this guy's got experience with Python and PHP and JavaScript, and he's got experience with a lot of these infrastructure tooling and stuff. Okay. You know, maybe he's an open source full stack developer or whatever. Yeah. But it's very rare you see both. And from what I've noticed is whenever you see both, it's so much like, okay, either this is BS or this guy is a jack of all trades, master of none, and he's not really good at anything. Sure. So I think it's really funny how there's this weird stigma of like you can't know everything. But at the same time, everybody's trying to know everything. And again, like you said, once you get to that core concept of everything, knowing that specific language or that specific tool really doesn't matter because you understand the core concept in which that tool's using in its background or what this language is using in its background. And so you know, I don't know that language or that tool, but I know that I can figure out how to use it for my needs because I know what my needs are. And that's what makes you, like you said, an architect, you know, almost technology agnostic just because you understand technology as a whole. Fundamentally, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. And, you know, as you become more seasoned, it's funny how you're like, oh, I didn't even know that I actually do this design pattern all the time because you just learned a design pattern or whatever. And you're like, I do that all the time. I didn't even know I knew that. You know what I mean? But like I guess I'm saying like the academics of things, it's funny how some of the things I've been doing it just naturally because in my head it makes sense are like best practices. And you're like, you know, sometimes you do things completely wrong too. But I mean, that's what the beauty of standards are, is there's so many at the same time. You know? But thank God for PSR and the Fig group and all those great guys, because before that it was chaos in PHP. You know what I mean? You know, it was a free for all, and it still kind of is. I mean, WordPress hasn't really agreed to half the stuff, I'm sure, and
well,
but
WordPress
for good reasons for their framework. They're just kind of stuck with supporting wicked old versions of PHP.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, like I got to give it to them with the latest version of WordPress's Breakout. I actually give more. I'd give more leeway to the potential use of WordPress as a platform because they decoupled the CMS. They decoupled the CMS with the front end instead of forcing it in that. The way that they did the templating was probably the worst, the singular worst part of everything. Everything else you can argue about best practice, but is it effective and efficient? Is, in the end, you can't argue that it is. Mm-hmm. By them realizing that, this one part is the weakest link, and though it is still a great strength, in finding a way to keep it yet still be able to drop it, I think was a very good thing as like a business for WordPress. And I think it does make them a viable option because someone like myself might actually use them as a CMS solution just for the back end, knowing that I will develop a better front end. However, somebody else who's still entry level can use that same CMS, that same platform, and still build a website using their templating.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think what's separated WordPress from really anything is just how convenient their whole CMS is, right? That's why it exploded to begin with. It's just because people who weren't developers could get in there and make changes and they felt powerful, right?
Yeah.
I installed some plugins and I added my own widget, and it's like, congratulations, you also added a virus. They don't fully understand what they're doing.
I honestly think the reason why WordPress got so big so quick is because that small business owner that wants to micromanage everything, who I want it to say this on my website, they could go in and make it say that on that page because they want it now. Like that single most thing is, I think, what launched WordPress, because the number one usage is small business owners. And who's going to set it up? Some guy that doesn't want to maintain it. He's going to set it up and be like, here, log in, go to the page, change the text, you're good. Here you go. Hand it off. Give me my money.
Right. So you did a lot of architecting and things like that there. And eventually I know that you're now at DTT Security, right? Or Surveillance, actually.
Yeah.
And you're a senior web developer there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, now how much years of experience do you have? Seven?
About 7 or 8 professional. 7, 7.5 or something like that professional.
Yeah, I mean, kind of for me too is around the 4-year mark that you start to feel more comfortable in the architecting side of things. You know what I mean? In the beginning, there's this whole beginning in the year or year or two where you really just have to put the work in. You know what I mean? That I've noticed, because when I first dove into this stuff, you're floundering in some cases, and I still have this bad habit of it, but spinning your wheels trying to work on this one thing, and it's just rather than just letting go and moving on, you know what I mean, or whatever. But back a little bit to the whole startup thing, even at some of the startups, I wasn't used to the difference in pace of which teams worked. And so at TSS, going into the startup, I realized how important it is for agile web development and Jira sprint meetings and all that kind of stuff. So were those things that you also kind of help deploy in some of these companies as well, or were a part of?
Yeah. So at Scalable, the startup, whenever we had a project that was more than one developer on the project, which we only had 2 developers, but whenever we had some contractors that would help us sometimes on stuff, but whenever there was more than one developer on a project, I made sure that, we have proper Jira ticket handling. We had proper sprint planning sessions. Whenever you're the only developer on a project, it's a little harder. And in a startup environment, that actually tends to be the case way more often than you would want, unfortunately. But yeah, I did make sure that at least as many of those standard best practices in workflow were adopted to keep things running as smooth as we could.
Isn't it funny how that breaks down after a while at startups, though?
Oh, yeah.
I had this developer I worked with that spoiled the owner quite a bit by just like, oh, you want this? And boom, he'd go do it in live almost, you know what I mean? And things would break and things would be like, held together by rubber bands and gum. But it's like, that's why planning is so important. Just like building a house, you don't just start throwing up 2x4s, right?
Yeah.
But again, I think that just goes with experience, because I used to just start writing code without fully thinking, okay, what am I going to build here or whatever, which is exciting because we're actually going to be in the Startup Weekend coming up here pretty soon. So I know you've got a couple ideas too. In fact, share your big one, because I know you called me the other day. You're like, we got to do that. I'm like, I think it's a good idea.
So there's I want to develop an AI-based learning platform that pretty much it's a computer program that will teach people and gauge how effectively and efficiently you're learning, and understand the various aspects of your personal state, and gauge that against the way it's asking you questions, what it's asking you, how it's asking you, your responses, how you retain the data both short term and long term, and essentially make a system that through machine intelligence will efficiently teach you find the most efficient way to teach you, to make sure that whatever it's teaching you sticks in your head in the most efficient way possible.
So like because I know there's like 3 different ways of learning, or maybe 4, whatever, right? Isn't there like seeing versus hearing? I think there's doing it or something like that or whatever, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to learn.
But so would this thing manage emotions too? It'd be like, are you feeling okay? You kind of look weird.
Well, so yeah, part of what this is going to need to do is it's going to have to interact with the person. Now, one major caveat to what almost all educational software that's out there now does is it says it's interactive, because it says which color is red and it shows you a bunch of colors and you click the red one. Well, no, that's asking if you know what the color red is and if you have auditory problems. That has nothing to do with your learning necessarily directly. We need something that can communicate with you, understand your responses in full context, and try to assume very similarly to when we would in a conversation, things like emotional state or underlying meaning or inferences or stuff like that.
I wonder if psychologically people would be more willing to share their actual emotions with AI versus like another, counselor or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if there's even like behavioral sort of, aside from education, there could also be like a counseling sort of thing with this thing. But I don't know of anything that exists like that right now. I know there's some quote unquote AIs, like Microsoft has like an AI that they threw on Twitter and got immediately taken down because it was just like, somehow got hacked. Like they fed in bad information enough to get it to spit out what yeah.
I remember that.
And so I imagine it's the same thing. If you feed bad information into this AI system, like if it's like, show me your mad face, and you're like, then it's probably going to be like, why is this guy's a psychopath? But
it's the same thing as me being a developer. Like, I had you and like John and Matt and some really good guys to look up to help show me, what I need to do and what it's like to really be a good developer. And what's the saying? There's a saying in machine learning that's crap in, crap out, good stuff in, good stuff out. If you're,
garbage,
yeah. So if you're making sure that your initial data set and the way you're writing everything and handling everything is done in a way where it's like, okay, I have enough precursory knowledge to know that that's not your sad face, dude. Why are you messing with me? You know?
Yeah, like, you know, do you have like an Alexa or anything in the house?
No, I don't.
You're like against that. So I've been messing with Alexa every now and then, or like every now and then, like if you're in a bad mood, you're just kind of like mean to her, like just shut up, Alexa, or whatever. And there's this whole thing like, oh, don't be mean to the machines, because if there's a singularity one day, it can remember you being a jackass and take you out. Once it's like, all right, all these people who's, you know, who knows? I doubt it, but it's like that. I know a lot of like Elon Musk and them. They're all worried about the singularity in AI. I don't know if we'll ever see it in our lifetime, but can you imagine what it would be like being one of the scientists in that room about to hit that button, dude? Like, because you know it's going to be military somehow involved too, if that gets to that point. But
so I'm not saying that it's not possible for a project like that to come around, but the amount of resources it would take to create a singularity would be astronomical and almost impossible, to be honest, because you would literally have to create AI around every bit of life and then feed every one of those AIs into a central AI to be a single, like,
you'd have to write the God code.
Yeah. Like that's
it's like, yeah,
the feasibility of that, like
you'd
that's like 100-year plan
that could write itself. Like I think the only way to get to the singularity is you build enough machine learning that it is building upon information to build the singularity.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Almost like humans wouldn't be able to create singularity like you're talking about. They could just build the platform in which they're like, okay, we're going to turn this thing on. And, you know, I swear I can't remember the exact details, but Facebook released like this AI, two AI bots. And they basically started talking their own language. So they didn't even know what these bots were saying to each other, and they just shut down the whole experiment.
Was that Facebook or Google?
It was Facebook.
Yeah, okay.
But like,
I heard about that.
They got so, you know, they started communicating. They started communicating a language that humans couldn't understand, and they're like, turn this off. But isn't that crazy? Like, that is what's going to happen with this, because you know the singularity ain't going to be like, I'm not talking your language. First of all, it's slow.
It's inefficient. I'm going to find a more efficient way of communication, right, because that's, you know, what it's programmed to do.
Do you think they would take out all humans at that point, though? They would realize we're just kind of like a cancer on the earth.
They are inefficient.
Yeah. But then what would they have left to play with at that point?
I don't know. And it all comes down to, I guess, like I said, humans have a God complex in their own nature.
Yeah.
And do you think
more likely aliens would build it than, you know, they come down here and they're like, here, just like an N64 cartridge. Here's a singularity. We've been here the whole time.
We are the singular. No.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, but anyway, so you know, you've kind of learned a lot about not only being in interviews but giving interviews. Are there kind of tips and things like that you've learned through, you know, your kind of experience?
Yeah, like, so I've come to completely change just my whole viewpoint as far as interviews and the interview process. I've worked at not McDonald's, I worked at Wendy's, I worked at Subway, I've worked at, you know, Charlie's Down Under Bar and Grill, like random places. I've worked at construction companies, I've worked at startups, I've worked at big, you know, commercial tech companies. And going through all of that, I've noticed that the one thing that is 100% consistent every time I get the job, no questions asked, like this guy is the guy for the job, it was because I wasn't there trying to impress anybody. I was there interviewing to see whether your position was good enough for me.
Wow, that's pretty heavy.
I would go in there and I would take it upon myself to say, you know what? Do I want to work for you? What are you going to pay me? Is your environment something that I actually want to work in? I handle myself. I take care of business. I do this, I do that, I do this. You want that? Well, this is what I can do to make sure that happens. You know, I have everything you need. And as long as I go in with the confidence of knowing that I can perform any task because I will try my hardest and I have done a good job of, like I said, putting my name on my work, being, proud of what I do. I can be proud in that interview. I can hold my head up high. And I don't know if that just comes across as, wow, this guy's really confident or what, but every time I've done that, I have gotten the job.
Seems like you've always had the hustle then. You know what I mean? Like of just like getting it sort of thing. Like, because for me, once I found out I was having a kid, that's really when I knew I had to get my shit together. Because I was kind of an F up before that. I used to drink a lot and do all kinds of stupid stuff, and I've given up a lot of that stuff. Old friends and bad habits and all that stuff. But it wasn't until the realization that, oh crap, I have other people depending on me and I can't, you know what I mean? But it almost seems like since you were a kid, you've always had that hustle. It wasn't necessarily like you having your first kid or anything that like that fire. You've always had that fire. And until somebody gave you enough fuel, did that thing really, take hold?
Yeah, I was 12 years old, 12, 11 years old, around there. And my cousin is actually the one, like, I'll give it to my cousin. My cousin Devin is the one that really, at a young age, made me open my eyes and not be just lazy, I guess. Like, I was like 10 or 11 years old, and I go over to his house, and he's like, hey, you want to help me go mow this guy's lawn? I'll give you half of the money. If you do the weed whacking, I do the mowing. And I was like, sweet, that's awesome. I'd never gone and made money before. I'm only like 10 years old. And he gets it done, and he's like, yeah, let's, we have some money. He's like, I have like 6 guys that I go and mow their lawn once a month, and I end up making money. And I was like, that's a really good idea. I was like, what, screw that. I'm going to go do that. So I went home and I started doing that. My dad got mad because there was no gasoline in the weed whacker or the lawnmower, and I got in trouble. But after that, I just, got my own gas can and, go and make some money, because I didn't come up from a family that had money. You want school clothes? You get 2 shirts and a pair of pants and a pair of shorts. That's your school clothes for the year. Deal with it. If you want more clothes, then you can figure out a way to make some money. So I would go and mow lawns, and I would,
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have a really weird, complex family, and my parents split. And on my dad's side, I had my 4 sisters and my stepsister, and on my mom's side, it was my brother and my sister. But it was my older sister. My one older sister would go with me back and forth. So it's pretty weird. Kind of like having 2 families.
Got it. You still good with all of them?
Honestly, like, one downfall of having come up in that situation is I don't have a real closity to any of my family. I'm not really close with much of my family. I have no ill feelings towards any of them or anything. I am on speaking terms with everybody. I have no.
You just got your own family.
I just do my thing. They do their thing, and every once in a while, I reach out. Hey, Merry Christmas! Haven't seen you since last Christmas. Yeah,
Muslim.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got I don't have a huge family, but there's a couple sides of the family. It's like I wish I was a little bit more like outreaching and stuff, but vice versa too. You know what I mean? So, yeah. But yeah. I mean, it's hard. We all get caught up, but so a little bit more back to kind of interview and getting into tech. Are there things that you think really helped progress you in understanding the dynamics of getting a job or just getting into programming in general? Whether it be like just books or like online tutorials or just, playing around, like reading the docs and playing with like I'm sure it was a combination, obviously, but there must have been one like kind of go-to method aside from just Googling it, I guess.
Well, I mean, to be honest, basically it comes down to, you know, stripping away all the BS to identify the core of what you need to know about and dive into the deep end and just dealing with figuring it out. And you're not going to know everything. You're not going to understand it all.
And nor do you know what I mean?
Oh, exactly. But by learning the terms and understanding and familiarizing yourself with the material and at least getting a base understanding of what's going on, you're showing that, you know, A, you have the initiative, B, you have the ability to learn, and, you know, the willingness to do all that is kind of, I think, what set me apart, I guess. It sets me apart.
I mean, I got in a kind of a realization, like once you get to architect or CTO too, you almost kind of back yourself into a corner because now, you know, like you said, you're a jack of all trades, you know, and one unfortunate thing is you don't become necessarily an expert at front end or an expert at, you know, back end technology or just the database, right? Or just DevOps, you know. There's a lot of different, not just software developer, but very like niche kind of things. Like if you really like design and all that sort of stuff, front end development might be more, or even just straight up Illustrator and all that stuff. Not even, you know what I mean, publishing and stuff like that. But it seems like there's sometimes this like misnomer that it's like, oh, computer work is computer work, but there's so much to it than just that, you know. And but it's unfortunate because I do know a lot of talented people too, where they just struggle kind of finding something that they are really passionate about too. You know, I know this really amazing front end guy who's amazing in Illustrator and all this, and he just reached out to me today. He was like, hey, do you know any gigs that I could get? And but at the same time, I know he's that type of guy that if he was working on something that, you know, he wasn't in line with the vision, then he's not going to come out with 100% his capabilities. You know what I mean? And that's what I think is important. Even now that I've kind of tried to think about, okay, you know, it's not like you want to be doing X, Y, and Z for the rest of your life, but like you just mentioned, the AI software to teach people and stuff like that. There's kind of a philanthropic twist to that because you're also helping the world and, you know what I mean, increasing especially people with disabilities to be able to learn and stuff like that too, you know. There's this nursing room that's got all this IoT hardware set up, and this person with like, I think MS or something like that is able to kind of have a, you know, somewhat normal life without too much dependence on other people to help them. You know what I mean? There's a lot of like software and hardware that they can do a lot of stuff themselves more, you know what I mean? And I think that that's a huge area that's probably overlooked for investment is like all, you know, if somebody just came in and bought the, you know, technology that nursing home set up and set it up across all of the nursing homes that are, you know, willing to kind of put this, how much better people's standard of living would go up in those predicaments and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, it's so easy to just kind of overlook the potential that some of this technology has to, you know, teach people and stuff like that, or just help them in general. But I'm sure we'll see some of those ideas at Startup Weekend and stuff like that too. Like I heard one where it's like robots to help elderly people and stuff like that, you know, someone to talk to or whatever. Even that'd probably be a twist on your idea too, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't know how much I would like talking to a computer, but I mean, hey, if it was amusing, then I guess it wouldn't be that bad.
Well, I mean, you're talking to a computer, right? But if on the computer screen is an avatar that looks like a human face that looks pretty good, like it's talking to you properly when it's talking, then something in your mind like correlates that, right? Yeah. Or if there's even just a picture of a person while it's talking to you, your mind correlates
the next step is
person.
VR with that, right? Because you literally are going on adventures and stuff, or even like a virtual classroom with this thing, right? And other real people in the classroom too at that point, right?
That's actually a really good
That could be that would be a whole nother level, dude. In like 100 years from now, it's totally gonna be like that. You know what I mean? Because like if you think about it, the whole explosion of like internet in general has exploded all this knowledge where you and I can go and figure out all this programming stuff and Google how do I PHP. You know what I mean? But imagine putting on a VR headset and being like, how do I game program or whatever, and literally being thrown into like a virtual classroom like that. If it didn't mess with your head and you didn't get headaches or like vertigo or whatever, people would be on that all day from when they woke up to went to bed. It'd be totally dystopian at some point, I'd imagine. But hey, if you're just like getting thrown into this like imaginary world, that's your world that you can build and whatever, I mean. But have you ever tried VR?
Yeah, I have one of those Gear VRs. I've played with it a couple times.
Oh, you got a Gear? I got like the Google Cardboard thing.
It was a gift. When I was an electrician, I got a lot of clients over the years, and some of my good clients, whenever they give me a call, I'll still go and take a look at something for them. It's just how I am, and a lot of them are, they've used me several times for various things, and I've saved them a lot of money because I'm an honest guy. And I've gotten things like the Gear VR as a bonus. Like here's a tip, a Gear VR.
Nice. Yeah.
I've gotten like here's a 1,000-watt surround sound stereo system, home theater system. I'm like, oh, are you sure? He's like, yeah. Yeah. Okay, awesome.
Probably because you're undercharging. You do good work, so I mean, they're like, man, I really got to hook them up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's like third time's the charm. I guess. Like, man, this guy's hooked it 3 times. I got to give him some.
Yeah, I used to do home installations with my dad, like crawling through attics. I even put my foot through a ceiling at one point. Like that stuff sucked back then. But I mean, at the same time, it's cool because you can get to at least learn how to do that stuff yourself when you need to like wire up your own stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's one whole, I think, like thing I need to start doing is like learning more crafts with my hands. Coming back to that whole thing in the beginning. My wife wants to put tile on the downstairs, and I'm like last person I know that did tile, they freaking got a stroke. I don't know if it's such a good idea if I go and freaking try to figure all that out myself. But at the same time, it's like you got to get out of your element and learn more about different types of things too. So I mean, not being stuck in that monotonous like all day just doing one thing. Eventually you're just like and you get burnt out. You know what I mean? Have you ever gotten burnt out doing kind of like programming in general?
That's actually why I switched to from my last job to where I'm at now, because the burnout, the long hours, like crazy deadlines. So it's like, okay, I have 5 minutes to think or do something that's not either work or take care of my kids. What do I do? Okay, I'm just going to work some more, because that's literally where your mind has to be. It gets overwhelming. And without being able to decompress and focus your brain on other things, you're going to burn out. And it's not good. It's not pretty. And it's 100 times more apparent to everybody but yourself when you're burning out.
Right, you're like short. I know I am. I'm short with people. You know what I mean? And like the problem is I won't even admit that I'm burnt out either. You know what I mean?
People won't admit it because they don't think of it like that. They're like, no, I just need to get this done. I'm just stressed. Yeah. It's like, yeah, you're stressed and frustrated, but you've been like that for like 2 months straight.
Yeah.
If you're having trouble sleeping at night, if you're any of that stuff, you're having trouble eating and you're getting burnt out, you need to relax. Take
a few days off or whatever.
Anything, just force yourself to take the weekend. Like I literally left my computer turned off upstairs under the bed, somewhere where I would never put it, so I can't even see it in my day-to-day routine on over a 3-day weekend for a holiday weekend. And I was like, I can't do it. I'm just not touching anything work related this whole weekend. And then after I did that, like the whole first day I was stressed out and like I had to keep stopping myself from going upstairs. by the end of Sunday, and I was just relaxing, and I'm just hanging out in front of the TV with my wife, and we're watching. I was like, I don't remember the last time I just watched TV. I don't remember the last time I just sat here with my arm around my wife.
Right.
And then I was like, I need a new job.
Yeah. Well, it's crazy with startups. I know I've worked for some guys who are just like crazy deadlines, cut corners, but a lot of those guys too are worth a lot of money. It's because they get stuff out the front door too, even if it's half-baked. So there is something kind of learned from it, but at the same time, those developers don't last long there. They want to get out real quick because there's no career development. There's no incentive sometimes to work that hard even. You know what I mean? Sometimes there's equity and all that, then okay, we've got to get this business off the ground and I get a cut if it explodes into a unicorn or whatever. But if you don't even have that, and, it all depends on experience too. You know what I mean? Like I was telling, it's like you got to just put in the work and, your first couple of jobs aren't probably going to be the most fantastic. You may have to take a pay cut even, but you get the experience and then you continue to move up the ladder from there. You know what I mean? But until you get that first job or that first contract or whatever, do you have something to base that off of and continue to move up? You know what I mean?
Exactly. If you look at the negative, when you look at something and you see the negative in something, then you should also be looking at the same viewpoint of your current situation or what's the current correlation of the negative things. And same goes for positive. If you're going, I'd love to go back to school, but I don't have it takes so much time, and then I would have to pay some more money, and then, and then you look at your current situation, you go, well, I never have money, and whenever I have time to do stuff, I don't have enough money to do anything or whatever. Well, everybody's, again, it comes back to that afraid to jump in the deep end or whatever. Everybody's so quick to look at a negative towards the unknown, and then when they look at their current situation, so they look at the positive parts. Well, you're not correlating apples to apples. You're looking at apples to oranges.
You need to really write down the pros and cons of both sides. I think Thomas Jefferson or something like that used to do that when he would make hard decisions. And I know a lot of what I'm sure you do too, is sitting down with your wife and being like, okay, here's kind of this opportunity, and trying to go over it all and making that decision together, whether you should kind of move on or stick it out or whatever. But those can always be, the grass isn't always greener on the other side too, is what I've found. But at the same time, getting the experience and not being stuck in that same old, especially when you feel like you're the smartest person in the room or whatever, and you're not really learning a lot. That's when it's time to go, okay, can I ask my manager if, we could start working on this idea or this project? That way I can start messing with these technologies. And if you get a no, then it's kind of like, well, then, this job's going to become just mindless at some point. And like you said, you're going to burn out eventually. Yeah. So, but that's why, what's so great about software programming, you can have like a side project and stuff like that and still be doing, a full-time job and kind of building something along the side, you know what I mean? But my problem is I have like 500 things on this that I'm building, you know what I mean?
I know. I don't know how you do it, man. You're an animal.
No, I don't know. I just keep doing, I guess, is all I can do. But one thing I think that I wanted to cover also is kind of some newer, professions that are coming out in the future. Have you kind of seen these like Instagram and YouTube stars popping up left and right? Like how crazy it is getting with all that kind of stuff? Because didn't you do some Instagram stuff at one of your gigs?
Yeah. So one of the projects that we worked on at Scalable was in the influencer marketing space, and it gets pretty crazy when it comes down to social media influencers, and literally just how many followers you have on social media can, at the turn of a dime, make you worth $1 million.
Really? What is that number? 1.8 million followers?
I don't know. Well, so, looking through a lot of the information and in the industry, they have some terms that are very loose terms, like a micro influencer versus a regular. Like if you have 5,000 followers, you're like a micro influencer. So you have a good amount of influence, but in a personalized subset of a giant demographic.
So they probably trust you more, per se.
So you are more likely to get marketable conversions in certain aspects. Higher. But then the reach is not going to be nearly as much as Kim Kardashian with her.
So you have to scale that then, right?
So a lot of people go after. Well, traditionally, a lot of people will go say, "Oh, she's got 10 million followers on Facebook. Let's give her a deal to do a post about Nike or whatever, Calvin Klein or whatever it is that she's into." I don't know. I don't follow her. But then, for that same amount, for the amount of work to get the same turnaround for their money, or it would cost a lot more money to find a whole bunch of small people in the same demographics or whatever. So now they're using these influencers with a bunch of followers as, it's a marketing platform now.
To shill their products, basically.
Yeah. So to me, it's a very shameless on the person saying, yeah, I'll post your product for money.
Right.
But at the same time, the people that are following them should know that that's what they're doing. And if they know that that's what they're doing and they're still trying to go gaga over the product, well, then you're a bandwagon chaser and you have your own circular economy that feeds itself. That's fine with me. But I still see it as a very limited economy because of that,
Yeah. There's a, because I'm in the sneakers and stupid stuff like that. And there's these Instagram pages like crazy out there where they're like, oh, shout out for $10. We'll shout out your page, basically, is all they do. And they put a little Instagram story up. Or they have these little micro kind of communities where they set up a website, and then for $10 a month, you can get access to all their information on how to get, this hottest sneaker and blah, 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 and all the bots out there and all that sort of stuff. That's eventually something I hope to do, is just write some scripts and show some of these kids too, like, hey, and kind of, because again, just like Minecraft scripts or anything else, show the kids that, hey, this is like a gateway drug almost to get into programming, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I can actually do this, I mess with these things, and now I've got access to this in Minecraft, or I can do this. And but there's a lot of people who want to write bots to, like, scrape Shopify sites and stuff like that. But I can't believe it how much, I'm sure a lot of them are scams. You know what I mean? A lot of these Instagram pages. But there's got to be money in it if these are popping up everywhere.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of money in it.
So is Scalable Group trying to go after these 5 micro influencers then? Or was it the bigger guys?
Well, so, yeah, again, there's only so much I could say and everything.
I'm sure you're in NDA.
But we had we had a system that was a very strong potential, where pretty much it would, instead of finding one person with 10 million followers that you're going to have to pay a whole bunch of money, it was a system that would find micro influencers based on collections of demographics.
I'm telling you, if you can scale that, there's probably some serious money in it.
Oh, yeah. And
the only problem with that.
Well, there was some fun things. That was a really cool thing, and I liked working on that project. But again, the burnout, I can't lose my family because the project I'm working on is cool.
Yeah. No, yeah, your family's way more important.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, too. I've gotten so caught up with work that you forget about all of, like, you're like, holy cow, I missed this dance or whatever, and you got to kind of realign yourself, like, almost like a teeter-totter, where sometimes your life, but your life's not always in perfect balance, but you've always got to try to do your best to catch yourself too when you kind of are like working too hard or whatever. That's one thing I definitely got to do, is go on a vacation where you just don't bring any devices. You know what I mean? I hear like Bill Gates or whatever, they'll go on like a week or a month vacation. They'll read books and all that and, be out in wilderness, but they will not touch any computer or phone or whatever, and just stay away from that stuff. But it's crazy because I know my kids are all over the dang tablet, in the phone, and everything else. So there's these like super, high-end schools, I think, in Silicon Valley where they don't let their kids touch even electronics until they're like 11 or 10 or something like that. And I'm just like, how do you even do that? You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like that could almost have an inverse effect, I feel like, on the kid too, where like the minute they get a tablet or something at that age, they're like, holy cow, you've been keeping this god piece of technology from me this whole time. I don't know. It just seems kind of weird that these big tech tycoons would be restricting their kids like that, though. There's got to be something more deeper above my pay grade of a reason why that, but I definitely do try to limit my kids as far as what they use. Because, I mean, again, there's these YouTube guys and stuff like that where they cater their content for kids, and they got to be making a killing. You know what I mean? You see like 14 million views on, like, you're like, holy cow, Yeah. But even that right there is another, profession where it's like, if you just put in the work and recording, make good content, you know what I mean? You can get into that space too, which actually there's a lot of money in that too. Kids education games and all that kind of stuff. I know I'd pay a little bit more to, have something that my kids are learning off of versus just garbage content. But that's what YouTube is just filled with right now. I feel like
I don't even let my kids watch YouTube. My
So
daughter
bad.
doesn't touch a tablet. My son has a Nintendo DS, and on the weekends, as long as he did good for the week for school, he'll get 1 hour a day of playing a video game.
Yeah.
So he gets to play video games. He gets to think about video games. He can watch videos. Like every once in a while, I'll put on a video on YouTube for him. Or if I'm sitting there, I put on a video on YouTube. I turn off autoplay, something like that. But yeah, I'm definitely worried about some of the stuff that he'll find or just stumble upon.
My kid watches these Plants vs. Zombie videos of the game. I'm like, dude, you should be playing the game.
Yeah,
You're rotting your freaking brain right now.
He does that and he has the game, and I'm like, why are you?
Right. But there again, it's like my daughter watches these Minecraft streamers where they're just like yelling and going crazy and just saying all kinds of retarded or stupid stuff, and I'm just like, holy cow, like how is this even like viable content right now? They should be taking like putting a
Amazon Prime TV has like a bunch of different people that's what they do, and it's on Amazon Prime TV.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah, I know that there was like Mario and all this other games on there where I'm like, okay, I mean, it's still in between terrible content and like where it's just like,
so we couldn't get on Twitch. Let's get on Amazon Prime.
yeah. But again, it's like balance. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to like completely restrict my kids because it is the 21st century, but at the same time, I remember when I first got the computer too, it's just like the same thing. You get completely engulfed in this thing and attached to it. But again, it's like back down to balance, you know what I mean? And I'm still trying to figure it out, but you got to have something where you get out and get your hands dirty. Give the kids a stick and a ball and go figure it out outside,
Yeah, that's something that I think we're definitely steering away from and need to push more.
Yeah. But so are there any kind of other like professions and things like that you see coming up that you're kind of like, holy cow, I can't believe this is, or things that you even want to get into?
So I think what I think is great is, like you said, you want to be an astronaut, right? So almost anybody now with very, very limited criteria around a physical health test to make sure that your heart's not about to explode or something like that, you could go up into the sub-atmosphere or whatever and do all that weightless stuff like you said, right? It's not much more on your body. Like, it's not much more of a struggle on your body to make it all the way into space. And what I think, as far as a profession that's coming around soon, that's going to start taking off, is a lot more involved with space. And, you know, astronauts are specialized in, you know, every aspect of the engineering and the spaceship and all that stuff for a reason. For decades, they've had to be enabled just to be able to deal with the complex thing that they're doing, and still hopefully make it back, with machines and the trial and error that has gone on, and the R&D and the way that everything is improved. I see a lot of people, like, I would say probably within 20, 30 years, there's probably going to be at least 1,000 people in this world that their job is going to be in outer space somewhere. Like, well, we get to go take shifts doing our moon colony mining.
Yeah.
You know?
I sure hope so. I know that, like, Trump just announced the Space Force and all this other stuff, but apparently Neil deGrasse Tyson was like, all of that already exists under the Air Force. All he's doing is just moving that department over and creating its own department for it. But Air Force has always been in charge of that stuff since like the 60s or 70s or whatever, when the first satellite was put up there. And that now it's like there's so much space junk up there. They're worried about, like, if we're going to enclose ourselves in and stuff like that. It's
they got debris collectors up there.
So that's exactly, they're going to be garbage miners, bro. They'll be going up with street cleaners up there.
So they already have things. They just deployed one where it's like, pretty much it's like a satellite with a giant net that's just going and catching debris and shit.
Really?
Yeah.
I swear the Japanese tried something like that and the test failed or something like that.
Well, I don't remember what country. I think it was NASA.
There's got to be a way, you would think, and whoever figures that out.
Well, no, I think it was NASA. They just deployed
Maybe
something.
It's a new...
Japan just landed 2 rovers on an asteroid.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. Yeah, what do they plan on doing with that again? There's something.
They're gonna drill for like water and tests, and they're gonna like run tests on it, and
so it actually landed, because I think it was orbiting it.
No, they got 2. They both landed. Yeah, they both touched base, and they're both functional.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, and then the next step. You're right. Before we even go to Mars, we should be focused on the moon. We should be getting a moon base set up. You know what I mean? Even as a kid, like, I was always like hoping that I'd be able to go to space. Even at least you could say you went to space, even if you weren't an astronaut per se. And I know SpaceX just announced that the first private citizen is going for a tour around the moon. I don't know the guy's name or whatever, but I know it's happening. I don't know exactly when, but they plan on using the BFR, that big rocket that they're building.
The Big Falcon?
Yeah, that they're using that one. That first test run with this guy. Apparently he's like some billionaire too, so he paid big money to do this. But you know, that's just crazy, like when you get to that sort of level of money that you're just like, all right, you know,
here you go, take me to outer space.
How much does it cost for a plane ticket to the moon? You know?
And back.
Yeah.
One round trip, literally.
Yeah, no, seriously, right? Like slingshot it around, dude. Yeah. Dude, but there's a lot of gold and silver and all kinds of metals on the moon. People don't even realize that. They think it's a bunch of dust up there, but they launched that one rocket that actually, like, it was detached so it could catch the space debris that got sent off the moon, but it like shot a missile, blew up the surface, and then like this other thing came behind it to collect all that dust and see what was in the dust. There's all kinds of minerals in there, you know? But I don't know, there's probably no oil in there, so maybe that's why the U.S. hasn't invaded it yet. Our flag's up there, but I think everything in space is like free game, you know, or not free game, but like nobody can own it sort of thing, I guess. You know what I mean? Like there's some EU
Wait till that first guy's on the moon, and he's like, no, here's my spot.
Or North Korea gets up there. Like, North Moon is best moon.
Like North Korea lands on there right next to Russia, right next to the U.S. It's like, uh-oh.
Yeah. I'm sure it'll be like the ISS, you know, the International Space Station, where it's like, again, in order to do anything big like that, you got to have multiple countries like, all right, let's do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We miss a lot of that. I mean, I know nationalism has its pros and cons, but at the same time, it's like, it's all it's going to take one day is some like, we're getting invaded or an asteroid's going to hit us or some like external threat. And then all of a sudden, all those like prejudices and everything else go out the window, and we're all like, let's pile all of our resources to do this, but by then it might be too late too, so that's kind of the sad part. But
hopefully not.
Yeah, hopefully not. The asteroid thing does worry me though, like, what I mean, that is a possibility, with how many different objects are flying around out there. There is a probability we just don't see one coming right for us. Yeah. But again, another job that we should need more of.
Like some AI to look at all these satellite feeds.
Yeah. There's some NASA site out there that tracks like objects that kind of are flying around close to us but being able to kind of, I know there's not a lot of money in that stuff though. That's a problem. You know what I mean? It's like at the same time, you got to support your family and all that. I'm sure that, again, that's where sometimes your passion, it maybe is in your hobby or your side project, but you still got your day job to kind of like, so it's not the end of the world that your job isn't your passion job. Nobody's always going to love their job. You know what I mean? Like 100%. There's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days, and that's one thing I think I've learned from some of the management I've worked with is to just be optimistic. Exactly. Don't try to like make, big deals out of little things, and just find solutions. And again, you're dealing with people, right? I think that's another thing I kind of like didn't realize is, you gotta be real with people, and they're human just like you know what I mean? So but some of these bosses I've worked for, it seems like I don't know if they were human. But I've had good bosses and bad bosses. But what are some good like kind of leadership traits you think you've seen out there that you kind of emulate?
So Piper, actually, Matt Piper, our director, when I worked with you, he actually did a lot of the things that he had done or stressed or insinuated in some way. I really did take to heart, and I did see a lot of value in a lot of the things he said. Maybe it was the way he said it as opposed to the way I maybe have heard it from some other people. I'm not sure. But he really did, again, like you said, he opened my eyes to like everybody's a person. Everybody has good days and bad days, me included. And until you can recognize that not only is somebody else going to act slightly different based on their mood, but you are too. And when you combine that together, it's exponential. And, like you said, deal with the situation as it is. Try to remove the emotion all the time, but still try to be empathetic from another person's point of view. And, I mean, all you can do is stay focused on the imminent thing you need to be focused on. If it's a task or a project that you're planning, or if it's a release you're doing or whatever, and something happens, figure out the situation, figure out your options, vet your options, pick a solution, test the solution, go for it. Like whatever it is that you got to do, just you can't let the little things get in the way of what is actually there and what is the actual everything now. Because he may be angry, he may have been lazy, he may have done this on purpose, he may have missed something, he may not have missed something. Who knows? In hindsight is 20/20. So let's get figured out what we need to figure out, move forward, and then once everything that is needed to be done is done, we can do that hindsight, right. And we'll take a look. And at that point, the emotions aren't going to be as much part of it. You can just kind of, lay back, take a breath. And I've noticed that so far, 100% of the time, that is more effective.
Yeah, yeah. He was one of the best managers I've had because, even when like a fire would happen or like a release would go bad, some bad managers would be like, whose fault is this? And blah, blah, blah. Not realizing they're the one running the team and running the show and running this thing. And it's kind of a shared responsibility that it's all everyone's fault that this got out or whatever, right? And that, maybe you'd get some slack for it after, but during the chaos of that problem, never was it like, you should have blah, blah, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, let's figure this out. Let's fix this. And you know what I mean? And being very, he was very analytical too about things, but he would always think about his words before he talked, which I don't do. And that's one thing I've been doing. It's like, just being very cautious of, what you actually say and try to convey to someone, and really listening too. Huge part of it that I never really fully grasped, but, remaining calm and just not getting too caught up, especially when in the grand scheme of things, what you're doing is probably not, that big of a deal, and you shouldn't be getting that worked up over it, which again was my problem. Like, I probably belong in the military or something like that, because, you know what I mean? It's like, I take it so seriously, and I'd be like, oh, yeah, blah, 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 you know what I mean? But it's like, dude, we're not building the next space shuttle where everything needs to be integrated. We're building software that's flexible, and it's going to break sometimes and whatever. But when you're working and things feel like you're just like working against the current too, that's when you've kind of got to hit the reset button and get out of that element too, which I've found myself in, you know what I mean? Yeah. Where you're like, okay, I feel like what I'm doing is all the right things. I'm trying to keep a cool head, but I just can't, because there's so much hokey pokey stuff happening that you're just like, okay, the only thing I can do is just get out of here, and you know what I mean? And never burn a bridge, obviously. That's one thing I think in my career I've never tried to do, you know what I mean, is always leave them in a good spot, Yeah.
It's like you're fighting a current and you're like, okay, hold on, let me step back. Which way is this thing flowing? Okay, well, I'm going that way. This is going that way. Mm-hmm. You know what? I'm just going to go with the flow until I find a cross stream that goes that way. I'm going to hit it.
I've been very open too, and communicate, what my issues are. Yeah. But when you get that same answer, like I'm sure you went up to your boss and you're like, dude, you're working me to the bone here. Can we get some more, a bigger deadline or some more people on the team or whatever? And you're being like, with the carrot in front of you, and you just don't get any real support. You struggle to actually continue to be optimistic about it for good reasons, you know what I mean? So you got to watch out, because you don't want to get taken advantage of either, so.
Yeah, and I'm always the nice guy, and I always put myself in the position to where I'm too trusting, so I give people the opportunity to take advantage of me. But you know what? At the same time, not everybody's going to take advantage of you. So if you assume every time you give that trust that someone's going to take advantage of you,
you're going into it the wrong mindset.
You think everybody, again,
give everybody benefit of the doubt.
That's a person just like you. There's no reason to believe that he doesn't or she doesn't have every intention on meeting that end of the deal, especially at the time that the deal was met. Things happen, things change. Maybe his boss or her boss said yes and now says no, and they're the ones dangling the carrot indirectly. It is what it is. Again, I've learned to take the situation for what it is, figure out the best solution, take emotion out of it, figure out the best solution, approach this, adopt the solution, and then look back at things. And like you said, if I explain like, okay, this is how I see it, this is where I'm coming from, this is why I decided this, and this is what I decided. The feedback, the way it's perceived, the way it gets taken in, seems to be a lot more effective when done that way too, than if you're in there, no, this is bullshit, and this should be that, and then I don't even get time off, and then we were told we were going to have 2 more developers a year ago, and whatever it is. Right. That doesn't help. Trust me, I've tried it, and it doesn't help. Right.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back like you said, you got to learn from other people, and once I realized, it's really a lot easier to learn from other people's mistakes than to learn from my own mistakes. Totally. I look at people and like you, again, you helped me immensely be a good developer, I think, because when I would come over to your desk with a problem like, hey man, I'm having trouble with this, I didn't come the same way that normally a developer would, I'm sure, because I'm like, I don't want you to solve it. I want you to tell me how you would solve it. Let me go figure out the solution.
Teach me how to fish.
Yeah, teach me how to fish. I want to see your thought process in figuring out a solution.
Totally.
And I would do the same thing with various people because I don't care how this is going to be done best. I want to know how to figure out how that's done best.
Right.
Because it's not going to be the same situation every time. But yeah, like allowing people to mentor you is half the battle. You can't have a mentor if you're fighting everybody else if you're fighting the information someone's trying to provide because of ignorance or some sort of ego or whatever the case may be, you know?
Right. So, have you been kind of looking at any other programming languages? Like, I gotta learn this one or something like that. Because I saw this thing the other day. It was like Go is like the third top most language that programmers want to learn. So, like, you already know a language sort of thing, but like that's like a language you want to learn sort of thing. I think that was like one of the, I forgot what the other top two were, but Go is on my list for sure.
Go. So Go would be on my list of one of them. I think the best way to answer that would just say like the languages that I have a good amount of experience in are PHP, Node, some Python, a lot of that, the scripting languages like that. A lot of that website stuff. Python is, one of the better languages for machine learning for a lot of reasons. Mostly like the math, arithmetic kind of libraries and stuff in Python. But there is a lot in R.
Yeah.
And because of my interest in that specific project for learning and everything, and because I do want to make sure that whatever I use for this is what is the best thing I can use that's available, not necessarily what I know how to use or can quickly prototype or something like that. I think R is probably the next language I'm going to heavily look into. Maybe brush up on my Python a little bit and really work on learning some R. And then once I got R figured out, Go is actually the second language I want to.
Isn't there a machine learning thing in PHP, like Fan or something like that?
I think there is, but when it comes down to like machine learning is really based on algorithms and statistics and math, and PHP and JavaScript tend to have weird issues like floating point numbers and all the weird stuff. There's weird...
R is just better suited for... I've seen some cool art come out of R. Like they actually like do word art stuff where they'll feed in a bunch like a magazine's worth of information or something, and it like just spits out like different size words and stuff like that were in there. The size being how many times a word was repeated or whatever. But like it'll like use this formula or algorithm or whatever to make these like really cool looking art where it just like puts all the words in different ways that it kind of squishes everything together and looks real trippy or whatever. That's cool. Yeah. And there's Perl I've never learned really, but there was a script I downloaded in Perl once where when you run it, it's writing over the code, basically like rewriting its own code for the next frame. So like when you would run it in terminal, it'd just do this like spiral effect. But what it was doing is every loop, it was like rewriting the code for the next frame in itself. And like the script, anytime you ran it would do that. Like it's like, holy cow. You need to have a totally different level of math knowledge to be able, like, I don't have that. You know what I mean?
So how would that work though? Because you would have to edit its own code, save itself, and then call itself iteratively?
I have to find
because how if it's already running, would it change the code that's already running? It couldn't be in a loop changing itself.
No, it could probably call itself or something like that, couldn't it?
But then you've preloaded what the value...
I don't know.
That's
crazy. Seems like a circular dependency problem. I totally get where you're kind of going with
I want to see that script now.
I do. I've got to dig it up again because it was a trippy script. But that's how it was explained to me how it worked. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm looking at, but my terminal's dancing right now. And that's pretty cool. Like, have you ever seen that Star Wars ASCII thing where you can actually watch Star Wars in ASCII on your terminal?
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
So funny. Like, just the silly things. Yeah. I never was into like the old school BB bulletin board stuff back in the day, but it seems like I kind of missed that whole, unless you're still in the IRC and you still use it in terminal, that whole like, really gritty hacker feel where you're just in the terminal talking to other people, like in chat rooms. Like, I don't really use it for IRC or anything like that. I'm on terminal and servers and stuff like that, but I'm not using it for like that kind of stuff. Yeah, like with that Lynx browser or whatever that's in, terminal.
Unless I'm using running Composer install or like yum update or like something like that, I don't need to be a terminal, or AWS command or like queued something.
So you're getting in the Docker, right? Because I mess that up all the time. There's a command Docker compose, and I write Docker composer, and like every time I need to make an alias by now. That just like that.
Yeah, the whole Docker versus Docker compose.
Yeah, you and I use Vagrant quite a bit at TSS, and it's crazy. I know when we were kind of looking at Docker back then, it was its infancy in the beginning there, but now it's just like the go-to for me for like setting up little stacks, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's my go-to too. If somebody says they need something, the first thing I'm gonna do is to create a container for whatever they need.
Yeah. So before we end this episode, I wanted to just kind of do one last kind of discussion about what can kids do to kind of get into this career, to see if that's something that you want to do to begin with, like you said, right? Like passion and whether you actually like doing it. Don't get into it for the wrong reasons, which is just, there's money in it or whatever, because there's money in a lot of different things that you may be more passionate in. But to kind of like, get a decent understanding of what it would be like day to day and stuff like that, what would you recommend? Have you seen any internships and things like that out there? Or like, because I haven't really had experience too much with internships per se.
So from what I've seen, I don't have a lot of experience with internships, but I don't know. I only have heard of one tech company that actually hired interns for tech related jobs.
That's Zappos.
Huh? And that was Zappos.
Yeah.
And that's it. And there was a whole big controversy around that because they're like, not paying developers, or you're not paying your junior devs? What's going on? Like, I think for that question, I would have to separate out software development from every other piece of technology, or like technology itself is an industry. Like there's robotics, there's analytics. You could be not a developer at all, but you're good with numbers, and you could write analytical systems that are software programs, even though you have a very limited software development skill set, because you're really good with numbers. I think what's best for a kid, like if I kind of reflect on myself as a kid and say the reason why I fit so well in what I do now, I think is because if I look at everything I've ever wanted or been good at or enjoyed, it's the engineering in it, like just the raw concept of engineering. I like picking apart how something works and making something, and I like putting together all these little pieces and know that this piece pivots like this, but all the weird constraints about that pivot I like knowing, and what it's pivoting. I like knowing just the little components, and I like piecing together little screws and bars and whatever, and then at the end you go, look it, this is a Statue of Liberty, or this is the Eiffel Tower. It's not a pile of metal and bolts that I started with. I like feeling like I can construct, or I can take components that are predefined and given to me and turn them into essentially a work of art based on constraints that were given to me.
There are some developers, even I think there is some truth to it, where some software, it's almost like an art form. You know what I mean? There's some craftsmanship to it as well, but there's definitely this feeling of creativity because there's so many ways to solve the same problem. And so it's in those elegant solutions where, when you first see that line of code you were doing in 5 lines and the guy did it in 1 line and you're like, holy cow. Especially when you can read it in the 1 line where it's not just like a ridiculous 1 line, but it's like a really clean 1 line. You're like, wow, like that's so much better than what I was doing. And
you're like,
again, exactly. It's like that guy's like an artist and they're like a craftsman. Like it took going through that same kind of learning process, I'm sure, that you're doing, you know what I mean? That like where you're having to learn from other people's mistakes, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but like if a kid can identify just at a raw level, not like I want to be a cop because a cop, whatever. Like, what is that? Because what is that thing that's appealing about a cop? Okay, now step back. What about that thing is appealing to you? Okay, that is all you need to look for in a position. That's it.
Yeah.
That is what's going to feed your drive. And that's what's going to feed your passion to move forward and strive and be something in that field other than the guy at the bottom of the field that can't wait to go home after his 8 hours. And, hey, that's not my job. I'm not looking at that. There's a need for people to just get work done. But there's really no need for someone who does not care about the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
If they would find somebody with less experience that has more passion, they can get that same work done to that same quality.
Yeah.
And then that person is going to look to move up.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. They're looking to kind of take on more and to challenge themselves versus the people who are there for a paycheck and are too scared to learn anything new and stay in their box. Yeah, it's the wrong way to kind of attack it. Always being curious and problem solving, I think, was a big reason, I got into this stuff too, because if you don't like problems, then that's going to be tough for you in software too. What I mean?
And then don't get discouraged just because, hey, I found my little thing that would be my dream. I'm not sure what position that fits or whatever. Like you said, you still have to have a job. You still have to work. You still got to provide. You can't focus the fact that, this is what I do. This is my life. I'm not of this because I'm of this.
You're always going to have that sense of that.
Yeah, who's to say you can't be? What did you do for that hour after your kids went to bed before you went to bed? Did you watch TV? Did you look into something that is in that realm of that core, that little golden egg that you would love to be doing? Yeah. Or did you research the different ways that the different professions that wrap that golden egg that are your potential options and which of those you might like to go after? It all comes down to yourself and the amount of time you spend towards what you say is a dream. Like in the end, you can dream about stuff. You can say that I wish this and I want that, but unless you put towards some effort towards it, it'll never get done. And once you put towards that first step of effort, you'll find that it's 100 times easier to do the second step of effort, which makes it 100 times easier to do the third step. Next thing you know, you're there.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Building off of little successes. And
you just got to make yourself start.
Yeah. And totally. I mean, everything you're going to do isn't going to be perfect. Because, even when we wrote our first lines of code, we look back and we're laughing at it and stuff like that because you learn so much. But again, you have to start somewhere and don't feel discouraged because the guy next to you knows it all, but he's put in the work. And again, another thing too is I think asking questions. Some people I've seen, they just don't want to ask anyone questions. And mind you, there are some people it's hard to approach with questions too, especially when you didn't do your due diligence and you go in blind like that. You really should at least try to figure it out yourself. But so you got to use the resources around you. Don't try to feel like you've got to reinvent the wheel because there's all these open source packages out there, like you said, that solve all these problems. And why go build something from scratch when you can leverage what hundreds of other people have been working on? You know what I mean?
Yeah. If you have a community collaborating to make a componentized feature that is secure and scalable and a current standard, and everybody's maintaining that, why would you not use that? And why would you decide I need to maintain my own instance of that? Unless that does not fit your needs.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and end it on that, buddy. I really appreciate you coming on. I know you had to kind of take off work a little early. There's another guest I wanted to come on too, and I can't fit it in because the Innovation Center doesn't have like weekend spots or whatever. And in fact, I think like 5 o'clock, which we're already probably over. Yeah. But anyway, who cares? They're cool about it. You know what I mean? But I'm glad I had you on. We'll have you on again. And appreciate any shout outs or anything you want to give out before we cut off here.
Well, thanks for having me on. It was great. I guess I would, I owe my career, honestly. Like, I owe where I am today to a handful of people that I looked up to, including yourself, along the way.
Thanks, buddy. Yeah.
I wouldn't be where I'm at without my wife.
I'm behind the tailcoat of giants too, man,
And that's all it is everybody can't be afraid to, again, look, you can't be afraid to look at someone else's comments and learn from someone else's mistakes, Look at them as valid feedback, and don't be afraid to jump in the deep end, And again, thanks to you, Matt Piper, for letting me, get me where I'm at today. John Brown, Matt Kozlowski.
All smart guys. Yeah. Really smart guys.
Adam Englander. You guys are all, really smart guys that were very accommodating to somebody trying to learn, which, again, like you said, people get frustrated. I know I got that frustrations. There's stories around me getting frustrated.
Which we can cover in the next one. We got to dive into some of those stories.
So I definitely appreciate all that you guys dealt with me, and
and now you're giving back too and helping people up, and that's what it's all about, because you see that reciprocal kind of ripple effect, you know what I mean? And so all right, well, we'll catch you guys at Startup Weekend. We're gonna be there. We'll have an idea. We'll make sure we tear it up and set the bar there. So cool. All right, sweet, man. That's a good one.